The first time my family asked me to lie for my sister, my mother was crying. The second time, my father threatened to cut me out of the family. The third time, my sister sat across from me at our kitchen table, slid a folded piece of paper toward me, and said, "All you have to do is sign." I stared at the paper. Then I looked at her. "You want me to say I was driving your car?" She nodded. "You want me to tell the police I left after the accident?" Another nod. "And you want me to take responsibility for something I didn't do?" My sister, Lauren, swallowed hard. "Yes." There was a silence so heavy I could hear the refrigerator humming behind us. My mother reached for my hand. "Emily, sweetheart, please. Your sister's life will be ruined." I pulled my hand away. "My life is worth ruining instead?" My father slammed his palm against the table. "This is not about you." I looked at all three of them. That was when I realized something. They had spent my entire life believing I would always be the daughter who gave in. They were wrong. Because what they didn't know was that the woman sitting across from them was not just Emily Carter, their quiet daughter and Lauren's convenient shield. I was Judge Emily Carter, and before I signed anything, I intended to find out exactly what my family was trying to hide. I grew up in a comfortable little town in Ohio where everybody seemed to know everybody else. Our house sat on a quiet street lined with old maples and brick sidewalks. My father, Richard Carter, owned a small construction company that had been passed down through his side of the family. My mother, Diane, ran a boutique gift shop downtown. And my younger sister Lauren was the person everyone in my family revolved around. She was beautiful, outgoing, charming, and fearless. When we were children, she could break a lamp and somehow convince our parents that it had been my idea. When she forgot a school project, I stayed up late helping her. When she got a speeding ticket at 19, my father called a friend who helped reduce the consequences. When she dropped out of college after one semester, my mother told everyone she was simply finding herself. Lauren always had an explanation, and my parents always believed it. I was different. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the girl who brought home good grades, worked 2 jobs during college, and went to law school on scholarships because my parents had already spent years telling me there wasn't enough money to support both daughters equally. I never complained. Maybe that was my biggest mistake. I thought being patient would eventually earn me the same love Lauren received naturally. Instead, it taught everyone that I would tolerate being overlooked. After law school, I moved away and built a career. I worked hard. I studied harder. I spent years in courtrooms learning how much damage one lie could cause. Eventually, I was appointed to the bench. It was not something I bragged about. In fact, almost nobody in my family knew. That was partly because the appointment had happened quietly, and partly because I had stopped telling my parents much about my professional life. They knew I worked in law. They knew I had advanced, but they did not know exactly where. They never asked. That was one of the first things I learned about family. Sometimes people do not ignore your success because they do not know about it. Sometimes they ignore it because knowing would force them to see you differently. I had kept my distance for years, but when my grandmother died, I came home. Her name was Aveline Carter. She was my father's mother, and she had always been the one person in the family who saw me clearly. She was the first person to tell me I should become a judge. "You have a steady mind," she once told me. "You don't let anger make your decisions." I laughed when she said it. She smiled. "One day you'll understand why that matters." After she passed, there were disagreements about her estate. Nothing dramatic at first. A house, a small collection of investments, some land outside town, and a trust she had created years earlier. My parents expected Lauren to receive most of it. I didn't care. I had a career, a home, savings, and a life I had built for myself. But Grandma Evelyn had different plans. Her will gave Lauren a modest inheritance. The larger assets were placed into a trust to be managed for both sisters. My father hated that. He said it was unfair. My mother said Grandma had become confused in her final years. Lauren said nothing. That was what bothered me. She said nothing. The night before the funeral, I found her standing alone in Grandma's study. "You okay?" I asked. She turned around quickly. "Yeah. What are you doing?" "Looking through old things." I smiled. "You always did love treasure hunts." She didn't smile back. "What happens to the house?" "I think The trust owns it. She stared at me. Do you know how much that house is worth? I shook my head. Probably a lot. Almost 800,000. I raised my eyebrows. That much? She nodded. Then she whispered, Dad wants to sell it. That's his choice if the trust allows it. Lauren looked at me. What if it doesn't? I didn't answer. That night, she asked me something strange. Emily, would Grandma ever change her will after making it? I looked at her carefully. Why? Just wondering. I never forgot the look in her eyes. It was the first clue that the inheritance mattered much more to her than she was admitting. A few weeks later, everything changed. It happened on a Thursday evening. Lauren had driven my father's SUV into town. According to her story, she had gone to meet a friend for dinner. On the way home, she said something happened. A pedestrian had entered the road near a poorly lit intersection. Lauren panicked. She kept driving. She said she had not known exactly what had happened until she saw the news later that night. There were no cameras at the exact location, but there was a witness. There was also evidence from the vehicle, and there was a growing investigation. My parents were terrified, not because someone was hurt, not at first. They were terrified because Lauren had been behind the wheel. The family attorney called. My father called another attorney. My mother called me. Come home. I was already driving. When I arrived, the atmosphere inside the house was completely different. My father paced the living room. My mother sat on the couch with both hands clasped together. Lauren stood by the window. She looked pale. What happened? I asked. Nobody answered. Finally, my father spoke. Lauren had un accident. I know. He looked at me. What do you know? I heard there was an investigation. Lauren started crying. I walked toward her. Tell me the truth. She covered her face. I'm scared. What happened? I was driving. I waited. Then someone stepped into the road. Another pause. I panicked. I looked at my father. And then? He answered for her. She came home. I closed my eyes. Dad, she needs a lawyer. She has one. Good. My father stepped closer. We need to protect this family. I stared at him. That is not the same thing as protecting Lauren. It is tonight. I knew exactly what he meant. I left the house an hour later. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. Emily, we need to talk. About Lauren? Yes. I went to my parents' house after work. When I arrived, the same 3 people were sitting around the kitchen table. Then came the request. My sister wanted me to take the blame. At first, I thought I had misunderstood. Then she slid the paper across the table. The plan was simple. I would say I had borrowed the SUV. I would say I was driving that night. I would say I panicked and left. Lauren would stay out of it. The family would arrange everything. My father had already spoken with someone who could help smooth things over. My mother said no one would ever know. I looked at the paper again. No. My father's face hardened. Think carefully. I have. You are her sister. That doesn't make me responsible for her choices. My mother began to cry. Emily, please. I stood. You're asking me to tell a lie that could follow me for the rest of my life. Lauren whispered. I'll make it up to you. I stared at her. With what? She looked away. My father stood. You owe this family. That sentence hurt more than the request. I laughed softly. I owe you? He pointed at me. You were given everything. I almost said it. I almost told him where I worked. But then I stopped. Because I realized the truth. They were not asking because they trusted me. They were asking because they thought I was powerless. So I simply said, no. That night, my father called me 23 times. The next morning, my mother sent messages saying Lauren might lose everything. The day after that, my sister called crying. Please, Emily. No, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. No, you don't. Dad says if I'm charged, the trust will be affected. We could lose Grandma's house. I froze. The trust? Lauren went silent. What does Grandma's trust have to do with your situation? I don't know. You just said it did. She hung up. That was the moment I knew something bigger was happening. I contacted an attorney I trusted. I did not tell him everything. I simply asked whether a person under investigation could be pressured into transferring responsibility for an event to someone else. He said it was a serious matter. Then he asked me why I was involved. I'm not, I said. at least not officially. But I began looking into my family's finances. That was when the second surprise appeared. There were debts. A lot of them. My father's construction company had been struggling for months. Several properties had loans attached to them. And Grandma's estate included an investment account large enough to keep the company afloat. The trust had restrictions. My father could not simply access the money, but there was one possible path. If Lauren were the sole beneficiary of certain assets, the process might become easier. I stared at the documents for a long time. Then I remembered Lauren's question. What if Grandma changed her will? She had not. My father had another plan. The accident was not just about avoiding trouble. It was about money. My family had been trying to control Grandma's inheritance, and Lauren was the key. Then came the third surprise. The vehicle involved that night was not actually my father's SUV. It belonged to a company connected to his construction business, and the insurance policy listed Lauren as an authorized driver. That meant they had lied to me again. I confronted Lauren. She finally admitted the truth. Dad told me the company could handle it. What exactly does that mean? I don't know. Lauren. She started crying. He said the vehicle could be reported differently. Different how? She stared at the floor. They could say it was somewhere else. I felt a chill move through me. Who else knows? She did not answer. Who else, Lauren? My father. Mom. The family attorney. I leaned back. And you? She whispered. Yes. You understand what that means? She nodded. I'm sorry. No. You are scared. She looked at me. There's a difference. 2 days later, I received another call. This one was not from my family. It was from a court administrator. Judge Carter, we have a potential conflict issue. I listened carefully. The investigation connected to my sister was being reviewed by a court in the same county where I worked. No direct case had been assigned to me yet, but the possibility existed. I disclosed my family connection immediately. I followed every ethical rule required of me, and then I stepped away from anything related to the matter. I did not influence the case. I did not speak to investigators. I did not use my position. I simply waited. My family had no idea. That was important, because while they believed I had become a frightened daughter refusing to help them, I was watching everything from a distance. Then the family attorney called me. Emily, your father tells me you're refusing to cooperate. I am. That may create serious problems for the family. That is not my responsibility. You should reconsider. Why? He paused. Then he said something that changed everything. Because your grandmother's trust can be challenged. I narrowed my eyes. On what grounds? We believe she was not fully capable when the trust documents were finalized. I almost laughed. Grandma Aveline had been sharp as ever. She had discussed the trust with me personally. She remembered every detail. What evidence do you have? Another pause. We have witnesses. I knew immediately. Someone was lying again. I called the estate attorney who had represented Grandma. He confirmed something shocking. The trust documents had been signed in the presence of 2 independent witnesses and a notary. Grandma had also undergone an evaluation confirming her capacity. There was no reasonable basis to challenge it, unless someone had manufactured new evidence. And then I found the name of the person trying to do exactly that. Lauren. My sister had signed a statement claiming Grandma had become confused months before the trust was created. But that was impossible, because I had a video call with Grandma on the exact date Lauren claimed she could barely remember her own family. Grandma had been laughing. She had joked about my terrible cooking. She had asked about my courtroom schedule, and she had warned me not to let anyone bully me after she was gone. I saved that recording. I had never thought of it as evidence. Now it mattered. The case continued. My father became increasingly desperate. He stopped calling me his daughter. Instead, he called me selfish. My mother told relatives that I had abandoned Lauren. At family gatherings, people whispered. A cousin messaged me. You should help your sister. I replied. You don't know the whole story. She wrote back. Nobody does. Exactly. Nobody did. But they were about to. The investigation uncovered inconsistencies in my sister's story. Then the vehicle records showed the SUV had been serviced shortly before the incident. A damaged part had been replaced after the event. Someone had tried to hide the connection. Then investigators discovered that someone had attempted to create a false record showing the vehicle was at my home that night. The problem? I was not home. I had been at a professional event nearly 2 hours away. There were receipts, security footage, witnesses. My family had failed to notice that my life no longer revolved around them. A week later, my father asked to meet. I agreed. We met at a small diner outside town. He sat across from me, suddenly looking older. Your sister is falling apart. I'm sorry. You can save her. How? He leaned forward. Take responsibility. I said nothing. He lowered his voice. I know people. I stared at him. You keep saying that. I can make this go away. No, you cannot. His eyes narrowed. How confident are you? I almost smiled. Very. He studied me. Then he said, You think you're better than us? I shook my head. I think I finally understand who you are. He looked away. That was the last time I spoke to him privately. The final twist came 3 days later. Lauren contacted me at midnight. She was crying. I need to tell you something. Go ahead. Dad didn't know everything. What does that mean? He told me the plan was to say you were driving. I know. But there's more. I waited. He knew the person involved. My heart stopped. What? He knew them from the construction company. Explain. She told me there had been a business dispute. Someone had threatened to report illegal financial activity connected to my father's company. My father had been terrified. The night of the accident, Lauren had not been expecting that person to be near the road. She had been heading home after meeting someone who had access to company records. Then she saw the person. She panicked. After the incident, my father realized the consequences could expose his financial problems. So he created a plan. Lauren would be protected. The company would be protected. And I would take the blame. I sat alone in my apartment, staring into the darkness. My own family had decided that my future was worth sacrificing to protect their secrets. And they had assumed I would accept that sacrifice because I had always been the obedient daughter. But they had made one enormous mistake. They had underestimated the one thing Grandma had taught me. Truth does not become less true because people are afraid of it. The court proceedings eventually moved forward. The facts came out. The false story about me collapsed. The financial records became relevant. The attempted manipulation of documents was discovered. My father faced serious legal and financial consequences. The company was forced to restructure. Several contracts were terminated. The trust remained protected. Lauren was held accountable for her choices, but she eventually began cooperating honestly. My mother, for the first time, stopped defending everyone. She told the truth. Not because she suddenly became brave, because she finally understood what the lies had cost her family. The confrontation happened at Grandma's house. All 4 of us stood in the old living room where she had once served us warm cookies in the winter. My father looked exhausted. Lauren looked ashamed. My mother looked broken, and I stood near the fireplace. My father said, You knew. I nodded. About what? You knew who you were dealing with. I looked at him. You mean you finally know who I am? His face tightened. I know you're a judge. Silence. Lauren looked at me in shock. You're a judge? I nodded. My mother covered her mouth. My father whispered. Why didn't you tell us? I answered honestly. Because every time I came home, you treated me like the daughter who needed to prove herself. He looked at the floor. I would have been proud. I almost cried. Maybe, but you should have been proud before you knew my title. Nobody spoke. Then Lauren stepped forward. I'm sorry. I looked at her. I believe you. She started crying. I was scared. I know. I thought Dad could fix everything. He taught you that. She nodded. Then she said something I had never expected. Grandma would hate what we did. I looked around the room. No. Everyone turned toward me. She would be heartbroken. That difference mattered. Hate is easy. Disappointment is harder. I walked into Grandma's study and opened the desk drawer. Inside was a small envelope with my name on it. She had written it months before she died. I opened it slowly. The letter was short. She wrote that families sometimes confuse loyalty with silence. She wrote that loving someone does not mean protecting them from every consequence. And she wrote one sentence I never forgot. Never let someone else's fear become the price of your future. I cried when I read it. Not because I was sad, because for the first time, I understood. Grandma had known.